She's going to do an update on where we are with our.
When you announce how the microphones work, yes? Just let them know they push to talk and it turns green and they can talk in the mic.
Okay, we're online.
Ready to go?
It's hard for me to hear you guys
Oh, well, I have to
from
turn
here.
on
From
the
here, so
Okay, let me turn on the microphone. I'll unmute now. Okay, Renee, is that better?
Given that it's drafted,
Go ahead and talk into this one.
concerned about.
I like moving
And I'll turn on your mic too. This should work. That's fine.
Maybe even another option could be.
How many likes do I have? I like that.
All past statements.
Are we putting this in? Since it's on.
No, she's just the last person who spoke. She is. Other than that, she is.
So, Jeff Kaplan, what's our?
How are you doing now?
Right? Everybody ready? Okay. Oh, that made it different. Well, welcome. This is the regular meeting of the City's Council of Governments. Today is Thursday, October 13th. Let's move it afternoon. I'm Julie Gold, Vice Mayor Beverly Hills. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like everybody to be here, both in person and on Zoom. I think we need to make a roll and at the same time identify those who will be voting members today. So with that, please. I can take our roll, figure out who the voting members are.
Yes, we'll start with Beverly Hills.
Julie Gold, I'm the voting member.
Sharada Nazarian, non-lead. Gabriela Yasta, BC manager.
Anyone else on Zoom from Beverly Hills? Culver City?
I'll search for member. You want to next one? What's that?
Shelley Wolfberg, Assistant to the City Manager, Culver City.
And a message here that the sound is distorted. All right, we'll try to fix that. Anyone else on Zoom from Culver City? Okay. Santa Monica?
Bill Brock, alternate, Santa Monica.
Sliwa Rich, I'm the representative from Santa Monica.
Any scripted deputy city manager. We got Jason Clear, our mobility manager.
Anyone on Zoom from Santa Monica? Okay. West Hollywood.
Yes, Seppi Shine, representative voting member from City of West Hollywood.
Lauren Meister, alternate, West Hollywood.
Lauren, it's hard to hear you, Lauren.
Hernan Molina, governmental affairs liaison for West Hollywood.
Corey Plank, strategic initiatives manager for the City of West Hollywood.
Thank you. County of Los Angeles. Fernando.
Hi, sorry, did you say County of Los Angeles? Hi, Fernando. No, okay.
No, yeah, you're good. It's just hard to hear you all in the room.
Fernando Morales, voting member on behalf of Supervisor Sheila Keel.
All right, Woody, council is suggesting that we fix the audio. Just so
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, we're gonna take a next minute break. Fix the audio, technical problems. We'll come back.
So who said Doc? Cecilia said audio was better. Does anyone know? Who is having audio issues?
Speak into the microphone and ask, or put it in the chat.
Who is having audio issues at the moment?
Are the other folks who are on Zoom having a hard time understanding
Yes.
what everybody in the room is saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe if y'all speak closer to the microphone because it's very hard to distinguish your words.
Cecilia, is this better?
Yes.
I'm speaking directly at the mic, so folks in the room, they can speak really, really close to the mic. Really helpful. Dr. Gold, can you test the mic for us?
Sure. 407 years ago, our father set forth on this continent, new nation conceived of liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Dr. Gold, that's much better. It's actually more difficult with deeper voices, so the closer you can speak into the microphone, the better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that resolves the audio issue. We have our voting members and the folks here in the chambers speak very, very close to the mic. Yeah. And I would suggest picking up the mic as Dr. Gold is doing.
Okay.
Okay,
Wait,
can we continue, Dr. Gold?
okay, so we completed the roll
Oh,
call.
not yet. City of Los Angeles. Is anyone else?
Jay Greenstein with LA City Council District 5, Councilmember Corrett's office.
Anyone else from Zoom who wants to introduce?
David Wilson, the City of West Hollywood, is here as well. City Manager.
Martha Arrows, City of Beverly Hills, Transportation Planner.
Good to go. Okay. Anybody else? All right. So we can move to our action items. Excuse me, now as we begin to turn to our council, the authorization to conduct teleconferencing meetings under 8261 and perhaps some other footnotes to that.
Yes, thank you very much. So we're going to do two things under this agenda item. The first thing we're going to do is make the findings that we can proceed with our remote hybrid meeting under 8361. So we'll need a motion and a second and vote on that. The findings are in the staff report. And then the second thing we're going to do is talk about whether the board wants to have a virtual option for the 2023 meeting, and I'll talk 2023 meeting schedule, and I'll talk through what the rules are, and then you can take action on how you want to present that.
So the first order of business is making the findings that we can actually continue today virtually. I'll entertain a motion from somebody to make those findings. So moved. Thank you. Is there a second? Hearing no second, we're adjourned. Is there a second? Voting member.
We would need a second from a voting member who's on Zoom. This is so that we can continue to conduct business.
I second, I'm sorry. And it is still very hard to hear Dr. Gold.
Yeah.
Everybody else I hear fine. I don't know what the issue is, but I sort of hear every other word.
Okay, I'll try. Is that better?
I'm sorry, I'm not, I'm not targeting you. It's just, you are hard to hear.
Did you hear me better this way?
Yes. What happens is we hear you better at first and then maybe you lean back. I don't know what you're doing because you're little dots on the screen where I am.
Okay,
I'm just, but that was better.
okay, I'll try harder.
That was much better. Whatever you just did, that was perfect.
It works. Okay.
I second. But again, I don't know what to say.
Oh,
City of Beverly Hills,
yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes,
West Hollywood,
Yes.
and County of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, now for the second part of the item. Clearly before COVID, this body had never allowed teleconferencing before. We have rules in our joint powers agreement that provide for a voting member, and if the voting member couldn't be there, we provide for an alternate. That's why we have the alternate system. And the old pre-COVID teleconferencing rules were very burdensome because you have to post the location where you are at the meeting location, and it was very difficult. So it was never something that this body really contemplated before. Then we entered into the COVID era where we had the executive orders of 8361, which you're all familiar with, and which we just made the findings for. And so there was a period of time where we only met remotely, and now we're in that strange moment to decide whether we keep on coming in person, doing hybrid meetings, or meeting remotely. In addition to 8361, you'll probably all hear this from your city attorneys. There's a new bill that was adopted to sort of update the teleconferencing rules moving forward. And I'll talk about those for a second. They're not terribly relevant here, so for the time being, we're still talking about 8361 and a period of time when we are in a statewide state of emergency, and there are some health precautions being recommended to promote social distancing. So that's the period of time we're in the moment, and 8361 is in place until the end of 2023. Factors for you to consider as to whether or not you want to allow hybrid meetings for the time period that we still have a state of emergency, and we don't know when that's going to be lifted by the state, are one, technical difficulties. As we just saw, it can be very difficult to get the technology to work, and if the technology is not working correctly, we have to stop the meeting and we can't take action. It's been a practice of this body that rotate which agencies host the meetings. And for a long period of time, they were hosted at all kinds of different locations. And the county and the city of Los Angeles also hosted meetings at various facilities that they own. And then what I've learned now is that there's only 3 of our member bodies that have the ability to even host hybrid meetings. So it's Beverly Hills, Culver City, and West Hollywood. So if this body wants to offer hybrid meetings in 2023, the meetings would only be in those 3 locations, and I think we would have to rotate between those 3. I've learned from Winnie that the South Bay COG and the COG meetings are hybrid. The Gateway Cities COG and San Fernando COG meetings are virtual, and the Las Virgenes Malibu COG is all in person. And as you know from your city, that's not right.
Las Virgenes Malibu is virtual.
Oh, well, okay. We were told they were in person, but we will trust you because I know it goes meetings in person. Okay. And as you know, every city is struggling with this and how they want to proceed. As I mentioned, there was a new bill, AB 2449, which changed the teleconferencing rules moving forward. However, I don't think that's terribly relevant here because it's really for an unusual circumstance. One of the board members has an emergency and can't be there. It's not really about hybrid meetings for the body and whether you want to offer this option for people voting remotely. So I think one thing we want to do, we've gone back and forth a lot, is that let the board members discuss how you want to conduct these meetings, and to the extent AB 361 will allow us in the new year to continue doing this, whether this works for the board, is it helpful, do you want everybody here in person? I'll just observe that the smaller group here than we normally have with the hybrid option. But people's schedules are busy and it can be hard to get here. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If you do stay offering sorry, to speak higher. If you do stay operating the hybrid meetings, we have to continue to make the 8361 findings every meeting. And we have to, even if you make this decision, we have to watch the state of the emergency and see what happens. The COVID numbers could go in a different direction, and we could go all virtual, or the emergency may end. So we'll have to be flexible, but we wanted to talk with the body about what you're thinking for the next year. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Is that working? Or try the other device. Did you, and you push the button? Is the green?
I think we just reached down.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. That's good.
It's flashing.
Okay. That's fine. We can hear you on the other, on the mic you're
On
using.
the other one?
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. Sorry about
Mr. Schmeicher. We'll figure it out. So before us is a question about whether we should continue hybrid in the next calendar year, 2023. I'll entertain some discussion if there wants to be some, or a motion for or against the absence of conversation.
I would just observe that I do think that hybrid, if you choose to attend virtually, you'll lose something in your presence. But I also value the flexibility that it provides people. So I would support continuing hybrid meetings until there's a change to the agenda.
Okay. Would you like to make that a motion?
Unless, yeah, I'll make the motion and if somebody objects.
Great, okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
I'm sorry, repeat.
That was Sue.
Thank you, Sue. We have a motion and a second. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard on that motion? The hearing and seeing none, we'll call the question and roll call please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
West Hollywood,
Yes.
and New Los Angeles.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Keep going. You're done?
You go here next.
Mike, you're done. Okay. We did that. We have two other action items. The first is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Is there anybody who would like to amend, addend, or some other way change the meeting minutes that have gone? I'll entertain a motion to accept them.
Move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Great. Roll call.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
West Hollywood,
Yes.
and New Los Angeles.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. We move next to the COG audit engagement letter. Cecilia, are you addressing this?
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly. Thank you, Dr. Gold. You might recall at the end of our last meeting, I noted that we were still trying to work out retaining an auditing firm because the initial quote we received was substantially more costly than we had budgeted for. Through the good offices of the City of Beverly Hills, we've been able to find another firm that's come in at a more reasonable rate for comparable work and has also quite a bit of experience working with COGs, including the Gateway Cities COGs and other JPAs. So for that reason, we are recommending that we move forward with this audit engagement letter that's in your packet to engage Moss, Levy, and Hartzman for a fee of about $6,500.
Fantastic. Any comment from anybody on this subject?
Move engagement.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Great. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Yes.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
West Hollywood,
Yes.
and County Los Angeles.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, item number 4. Cecilia, the executive director report.
Great. I will be extremely brief. I know you all read the packets. I'm not going to belabor it, but it's a pretty good summary of all of the activities we've been working on with the transportation group, work on group with homelessness and housing. The COG's been quite busy the last month, and we will continue to move forward on the various initiatives. We're happy to answer any questions you may have about the written report, but we're also happy to move on to the discussion items.
Fantastic. Thank you. Is there anybody who has any questions for Cecilia at this time? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for that report. We can move on to item number 5, the transportation update, Measure M sub-regional equity program and the prioritization process. Cecilia?
Yes. Dr. Gold, I'm going to turn it over to Riley O'Brien, who's our transportation expert and has been working very closely with everybody's city's transportation groups to try to come to consensus around criteria and a process moving forward on how to use the remainder of our supplemental, our additional dollars, sub-regional equity program dollars. I'm going to turn it over to Riley to talk through what the committee's been up to, or the working group's been up to, and then we would love to engage you in a discussion for further direction. Go ahead, Riley.
As we do that, Woody, is it possible to make Cecilia leverage the volume in here from that? Can we make that leverage? That'd be great. Ryder?
Yes, thank you all. Can you hear me?
We can hear.
Excellent. Well, I will try to keep this brief, but we have been doing a lot of work on this topic. So I just wanted to first provide an overview of our process so far. So just as a refresher, the sub-regional equity program was a $1.2 billion programming within Metro's Measure M, which was split among the sub-regions, in which the WSCCOG is allocated approximately $160 million. These dollars were originally expected to be available in the 2040s, but some subregions have already started to draw down those funds. And we have also learned recently that due to the federal infrastructure law passed last year, there may be a chance to obtain those funds sooner than anticipated. And this was part of the reason that approximately 1 year ago in October 2021, the COG voted to allocate 25% of our sub-regional equity program funds, so approximately $40 million, to the Crenshaw Northern Extension to support pre-development activity. And at that same time, the board directed the staff of the COG to work with the transportation working group, so staff from the member jurisdictions, to develop an allocation plan for the remaining 75%. And we had received that direction and in response developed a data-driven and a sub-regional approach to allocating that remaining 75%. So just as a recap, this was the direction from the board. We were asked to provide a list of priority projects as well as criteria and process by December. Now, one of the first things the transportation working group told us is that we would need a lot more time for that. So we did extend that process over the past year and met several times during our regular meetings as well as during special transportation work group meetings to discuss this process. And our first step, apologies for the slides, but our first step was to gather a list of potential projects from our Westside COG approved documents. So those include the 2020 Westside COG mobility study, as well as the 2021 unfunded strategic project list submitted to Metro. And with that, we developed a project list and used the evaluation framework criteria from the 2020 Westside COG mobility study to essentially rate those projects using a data-driven objective criteria for the projects where that was possible. And the 4 criteria from the mobility study that we used were access, time savings, mode shift, and safety. Once we had laid out that list of projects, we did gather feedback on the priorities of the member jurisdictions. And one of the suggestions from the working group was to group these projects into 10 project categories of similar projects. And then in doing so, we were able to average out those scores across those 4 criteria and add those criteria together to have sort of a total score estimating the benefits. So this chart here shows the 10 categories that we agreed upon as a transportation working group. And it does show the average score for those projects along these 4 criteria, as well as the sum of those averages to come up with the total score on the right-hand column. A couple things to note. There are some categories that only have 1 project associated with them, which is why they may not have a decimal point. And there are 2 categories at the bottom that were suggested after the WSCCOG mobility study. So there was not a criteria available from that study to apply to this measure. But we did find that in terms of benefits, and this is only looking at the benefit side of benefits and costs, the top 3 project categories were the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, the D-Line Purple Line extension to Santa Monica from Westwood, and an overall category for bus rapid transit and other bus infrastructure. And so with that in mind, we did also want to talk about some of the considerations that our member jurisdictions in the transportation working group have raised. And these considerations include intentions around supporting sub-regional projects rather than just projects within one jurisdiction. There was some preference for funding projects that do not have other reliable funding sources. But conversely, there were also some support for using these funds to actually complement other funding sources to serve as match or gap funding. There was also support around using these funds to support shovel-ready projects and to support and encourage favorable decisions from the countywide decision makers at Metro and potentially encourage favorable decisions that would benefit our subregion. So I'll go into these in a little bit more detail. And just note some of the trade-offs here and some of the different ways that we could approach these considerations. So first of all, in terms of the sub-regional network, that could mean funding projects that reach multiple jurisdictions. For example, the La Cienega Boulevard BRT passes through at least, I believe, 3 or 4 of our member jurisdictions. But we could also fund projects that may not necessarily pass through all jurisdictions, but are supported by multiple jurisdictions. So there was broad support for the BRT category in general and for bus improvements in general. We also noted that the sub-regional equity program could fund projects that do not have other reliable funding sources, and also that could serve as match or gap funding for those funding sources. So we also looked into what are some alternate funding sources for each of these project categories. And so examples of this would be California's Active Transportation Program and Metro's multi-year sub-regional program, since both of those can fund bikeways, first last mile improvements, and mobility hubs. There's also a lot of climate funding, a lot of funding directed towards electrification and decarbonization of transportation infrastructure and especially vehicles at the state and federal level, but focused on some state sources here, that Low Carbon Transit Operations Program and the Mobile Source Reduction Committee, which can support some of our vehicle and bus electrification priorities. Caltrans is funding for highway improvements, so the Highway Safety Improvement Program is an example. For transit infrastructure like bus rapid transit, as well as our rail priorities. The Federal Transit Administration capital programs can also support those. And then we do have some funding that may come in and that we're certainly trying to push for from the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, which Metro is focusing on the 405 corridor, as well as potential Olympics funding. A lot of that is still up in the air, but that could support projects that are along the 405 corridor, as well as along the coast where we have many of our Olympic venues. And again, we may also want to use sub-regional equity program funds to complement these funding sources. And we also note that in funding the Crenshaw Northern Extension, we were actually funding a project that is not shovel ready at the moment, but we were trying to push it towards shovel readiness. So we could use this fund to build projects that are already shovel ready. We could also use it to, akin to Crenshaw North, prepare for shovel readiness, do that pre-development work. And I did want to note that there are some projects on this list that do have future funding guaranteed, such as the projects that are later in the Measure M timeline. But we could also, if we wanted to, support pre-development activities for projects that don't have guaranteed future funding, such as the D line to Santa Monica. Then finally, I wanted to just mention that, again, we could use this sub-regional equity program funding source to encourage more favorable decisions at the county level. So that could include rail alignments and stations, such as our supported UCLA campus station for the Sepulveda Transit Corridor. We could also use this fund to encourage Metro to advance some of their county-wide BRT funds to some of our highest priority corridors, the Venice Boulevard corridor and the Los Angeles Jefferson corridor, both ranked very highly under Metro's countywide prioritization process. So we did want to just highlight that that could be a potential avenue. And with that, just wanted to provide that update and note that we are hoping to provide a more detailed update or additional update in the December meeting, but wanted to open up for any questions or comments from the board.
Yeah, thank you, Riley. I want to particularly note that this isn't, we are really seeking your guidance. Obviously, we've provided many options and many sources of direction. Your staff has worked closely with Riley and our team on that, but we want to get a sense of, are we headed in the right direction, or is there a particular way you would like us to go? As match or gap funding versus shovel ready versus really trying to fund stuff that doesn't have other funding sources. So we're trying to take the temperature of the board on if you have a particular interest in having us head in a particular direction.
Well, thank you, Riley, and thank you, Cecilia. Why don't we start with the folks on Zoom? Is there anybody in the Zoom world who has some comments to make at this point? Show of hands. Go ahead.
So I see that the purple line, which I assume is the Wilshire extension, is that right? Yes, to Santa Monica, right? So that would be, and this is something that we thought was 40 years out. It probably still is 40 years out. Obviously, the Sepulveda corridor impacts a lot of us, right? So I believe that if we work together on all of this, right, and find something that helps all of us a bit, that will make more progress. And if we have things that only help one jurisdiction, bearing in mind that we supported West Hollywood on its last ask, but I would support prioritizing it in starting with the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, but I'd like to see the D line there somewhere for Santa Monica.
Thank you. Anybody else in Zoom land? No. Okay.
I sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I think the D line for Santa Monica, I would support. There's really no current funding, so modest allocation of funds would, I think, be appropriate. As far as sorry, I'm trying to bring up these things. Bikeways, first, last mile. mobility hubs and bike share. That would be good, but I think there's streams of funds that perhaps also exist for these. I agree with Sue in looking at what would benefit us regionally. I think that was the reason why we focused on the allocation of funds for the Crenshaw Northern Extension, because it was good for the entire region. So I think we need to think regionally for sure, as far as any kind of prioritization.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom?
So I'm sorry, and I don't want to interrupt, but Seppi, in view of, we haven't talked about the bus rapid transit. And I do think that that's a valuable program, I have to say. I mean, I've taken it. I think there are a lot of people in Santa Monica who take it. I don't know if other people feel that way, but it's easier to and faster to implement a bus rapid transit line. These other things you're going to be digging, and that takes forever. So I don't think we should ignore that.
Agreed. I think the bus rapid transit is really important, and it would connect all of the WSCCOG jurisdictions except Santa Monica. But
no, actually, we have metro buses that run. Yeah, we have a bus to downtown from.
So this would benefit you. Okay, great.
Yeah, the
Wonderful.
3 and the 7, and there. Yes, but we do have buses from Santa Monica, rapid buses.
Okay.
Great. Anybody in the chamber?
Just to offer, in the process, I think this is exactly the direction to go, the sort of objective scoring regionally. And when I look at that and look at the relatively small amount of money, given what transit projects cost and the other opportunities to leverage our spending and jumpstart even federal dollars, but certainly metro dollars, state dollars, it's really an opportunity for climate action. That's when we do things that address climate. We're likely to get additional money with this relatively small amount. When we do stuff with the Olympics, we're likely to get stuff, additional money with this stuff. And I think that really points towards bus rapid transit because it is cheap to implement. It is central to the Olympic plans. And it will move the needle. It's sort of like ripping off the Band-Aid to provide that network that really completes the rails. So I think the process is fine. If it were up to me to actually kind of guide towards a particular outcome, I would focus on bus rapid transit. Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the chamber? Well, I would agree with the prioritization here. I also agree with comments about how important the bus route is. The only reflection I would have beyond that is $120 million in this world is really not a lot of money. For us to put $120 billion meaningfully into the D line, for instance, we would probably buy a quarter of a mile of tunneling if we're lucky in today's dollar. So I would ask that as you further study this, you give some thought to a meaningful result to our residents, the residents of the COG city, looking at things, talking about the bus route. Could we create amenities that make the bus route more pleasant? We could spread it over the region for $120 million. I think we could probably make a significant impact on things like that. So I'd like you to get, perhaps you are, but as you this program, I'd like you to think about how the residents are going to use this and what's going to make their life better and what would be a meaningful use of this amount of money across the region. There are probably other things besides that, but that just kind of came to mind as a way that we could actually improve the bus system, and it was something that our residents would see and appreciate.
Dr. Gold, we have Mayor Pro Tem Stephanie Shine who wants to speak next.
Okay. So,
Thank you, Chair. One thing I do want to, add to the Sepulveda Transit Corridor. We ought to remember that while we all support a station at UCLA, the COG has already dedicated a huge portion of its Measure M funds towards the Sepulveda project. And since Chair Gold was saying this is a limited amount of funding, there's several Metro board members that also represent this. I think that probably a better way to influence this decision is political pressure through the Westside COG's various board members. And I'm not sure if that is really something we need to prioritize that much with funding, because there's already been an allocation. So maybe some of these other things that we've talked about would be a more appropriate priority.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so to Riley and Cecilia, do you have sufficient direction?
We do. Thank you, Dr. Gold. I feel like we've gotten really good direction from everyone and we will proceed. This has been a very useful discussion for us. Thank you.
Thank you. We're up to item number 6, housing updates.
I'm going to send this over to Winnie to quickly run through what's happening with housing.
Yes, we'll start with the RENA reform comments. So at the last board meeting in August, we had SCAG come and present their process, their stakeholder input process on the RENA reform. Mayan Johnson, a SCAG housing manager, was able to report all the comments that were mentioned at the meeting, and we were directed by the chair to develop a summary list of comments, which is listed in the staff report. We just circulated that around and asked the staff and board members if there are additional comments. And looking at the overall shared themes, it appears to be very broad and lacks specificity that SCAG would like in determining recommendations related to regional determination and the methodology. So when we reached out to SCAG to see what the timeline is, HCD doesn't have to take action until December 31st, 2023. So there is time to provide additional comments, and SCAG did inform us that they are working on collecting comments and also looking to draft recommendations to the report and present to the regional council sometime in the middle of 2023. So there will be another opportunity for them to do another round of stakeholder input to present the draft recommendations for us to provide additional input.
Great. So with that, I think you circulated the outline of our conversation. At the last meeting, I would suggest we just proceed to file it, and you'll bring this back in several months. First reading, sir. Okay. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay. On to REAP 2.0.
Yes, Riley, can you? So this is an informational item as part of REAP 2.0. This is the Housing Supporting Infrastructure Program that was part of REAP 2.0. It just has a different name. It's called Program to Accelerate Transformative Housing, also known as PATH. This is a program, the draft guidelines are currently out, and I wanted to present this to the attention of the cities, because they can actually apply this directly. And there are 3 buckets that this funding can are eligible for activities, including funding for loss affordability. This is for innovative housing finance that could fund existing or potentially trust funds or existing housing finance programs. Also, regional utility supporting housing, support utilities for accelerated housing development, and lastly, accelerating and scaling up development of available land on private and public land along large corridors and areas. Next slide. So here's the funding breakdown. There's 80 million or billion available in, so this is the draft allocation. They are accepting comments and feedbacks from cities and jurisdictions. So wanted just to bring this all attention. And next slide, right? And the proposed timeline is they're looking at releasing it for jurisdictions to apply the revenue to the fund in early 2023. And that is
Fantastic. Anybody on Zoom who would like to question, comment? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, anybody in the room? Okay.
Mr. Gold, if I may, I just want to underscore for our members that this funding is available. It's coming up fast and they need to spend it quickly. So we strongly encourage your cities to apply for it. We're happy to brief you further. But this is a really important opportunity that we hope all of our cities will avail themselves of.
Fantastic. Okay. Moving on, we're up to item number 7. This follows the presentation that I think everybody attended by Zoom a couple weeks ago that discussed the regional mental health crisis and some opportunities for us to work together to try and there's some way that we can collaborate, put our resources together and create something bigger than anything we each alone could do. I think there was some discussion at the end of that from Santa Monica about things that they were starting to do. And the question would be, well, what does that look like in terms of what will cost to do different, independent of that? I think there are options that look like that. I also think that each of our cities is doing stuff. We're all spending a lot of money at this. And it would be important for us to understand what we are already doing and what we could do in the process. And where do we overlap? Where is there synergy? Where are the gaps? Where are things that we could perhaps do better? And so for me, I think this conversation sort of extends that conversation and it's really about how do you want to move this process forward? I don't know, Cecilia, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just jump in to frame this, to tee off of that framing, that at the end of the special meeting, there was certainly a lot of energy and support for the subregion to see how we could combine forces. And there was hope that the COG staff, that we could help coordinate that. So we really are seeing this as a continuation of that discussion. We're hoping that maybe we can go around the table among our member cities, our member jurisdictions, to hear a little bit about what you are doing. And we thought we'd start with Santa Monica because I know Mayor Himmelrich has done quite a bit on this, but actually just sort of go around and hear what are efforts that individual members are either pursuing or would like to pursue on a sub-regional basis. That would give us a sense of how and if you would like the COG to take on a role, COG staff, in trying to coordinate these efforts for a more sub-regional approach. With that, Dr. Gold, I think if you're okay with it, it probably makes sense to go ahead and circle around with all of our members.
This is great. Lost count. Sure, I'm happy to do that. I also think we have to be realistic in our expectations. We're going to solve problems today. I think we can put some ideas out there, but I think that it also really is a concept that begs for a working group, probably at the staff level, to kind of put together a metric, a set of metrics. So perhaps as a to-do to follow, we could do that. But I certainly to kick it off and tee it off, let's start with that. And two, being that Santa Monica had already started this conversation, we ask you to go first.
Well, so I believe Maggie Willis is here to dig in into more detail. Maggie, I see, there you are. But let me just say that the reason that we may be just a little bit ahead of other people, and I don't think we're that much ahead, because as everyone says, this is a regional problem, is that we had a DA pending for St. John's Hospital. And St. John's had $10 million that people were pushing to go to psychiatric beds. And the reason that this OC Be Well thing came to our attention was because it was an alternative, and I thought better use of the 10 million than whatever psychiatric bed. So we moved to that, but I have to emphasize that in this space of behavioral crisis, mental health facility and funding, you have to jump on whatever you have before, as I said to somebody, I didn't check with my bosses before I did that. I went to the guy from St. John's and said, put the $10 million into this. I just did it. And I think that's what we all need to be doing to be brave leaders. We can't stop. We can't check with our bosses. We just go, yes, we're interested in that, right? Give me more information and do it, right? So that's my piece. Now, Maggie, you do the details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Mayor Himmelrich. I'm going to record that and save that so that when me and my team go completely rogue, we can hold that up as our defense. We are not going to ask permission. So thank you for the time. We in Santa Monica, we are taking some immediate steps to start to plan a comprehensive long-term strategy to address behavioral health. We know this is going to be a marathon. And so we want to start with bringing on a group called Initium Health. So we did do an RFP to secure an expert team to come in and lead this work on behalf of the city. So Initium is starting soon. They are going to do a community engagement process. We're going to really focus on reaching some of our marginalized community members, our consumers and their families, to really get a good sense of what this community wants, needs, and will support. Because I think if we don't start this process with robust community support, it will be dead in the water when we start to try to implement programs or site facilities. So we really want to start with that basis of getting the community support up front. And then using that information, we are going to have the Initium team look at up to 5 sites and do a full site assessment based on the size of the site, the development and planning parameters, what it would cost to do X, Y, or Z at each of these locations. And then we can move forward with making some decisions about size, scope, what type of facilities, what populations would be served. And we are looking at this in a long-term way. So the first steps may be focused on one population, but we will make sure that there are plans in place and we don't lose sight of all the various populations in the community that need and want and would benefit from behavioral health services. So that contract is in route right now. We should be able to bring Initium on very soon. We will definitely bring Initium back to the COG group as well, because I think your feedback and your input will be important as we start to develop these strategies.
Thank you for that. Okay. Sandy.
Yes, thank you. So we have been in the city of West Hollywood, have in development a behavioral health crisis response units. And I think it's really great that we're having these discussions, and there are definitely ways that sub-regionally we can partner. And I know staff's been working a lot with the different staff from all of your cities and the county. So I'm going to have Corey Plank actually address this for us.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We are in development phase of a behavioral health crisis response team that would serve as a third first responder unit. In addition to sheriffs and fire, we would have a mental health focused team that could respond to emergency calls in an alternate crisis response format where they're rolling out without law enforcement. We are partnering and trying to develop this team in parallel with the ACR and MCOT teams that the County Department of Mental Health is developing. And we're also looking to utilize the relatively new opportunity with 988 as a call center. And I think folks on this call know that D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services was selected as the call center provider for the county's program. And so they are able to take calls now to manage crisis, but we're looking forward to more infrastructure being developed so that they can actually help with dispatch and deployment of the units in the various cities. In addition, this for us, this is an additive, this is an additional piece of mental health support to our existing continuum of care. The city funds a variety of social service organizations that also have behavioral health opportunities for folks to connect to services, as well as our city-funded MET team. We have a mental health evaluation team embedded in the sheriff's station that is a specially trained deputy and a DMH clinician. And so this will be an add-on to those existing services, not a replacement for those. And we will continue. We're pretty close to having the RFP ready for agencies to apply to provide the services and looking for additional funding for some of the infrastructure for the teams. And the issue that we raised in some of the conversations that the homeless working group of the COG have had on behavioral health is the same issue that we have on a number of these issues, that in terms of citing a facility in the West Side Cities COG that's presumably not in West Hollywood, that we have in terms of service planning area. West Hollywood is SPA 4, while I think all of the other jurisdictions are SPA 5. And so I think that remains an issue that we have continued to address over the years in terms of having that dividing line separate some of our COG jurisdictions. So that's something that we would certainly want to explore as we look at this opportunity. And I will stop there unless the Mayor Pro Tem has anything else to add.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hopefully. Thank you. That's like call me next because we're doing it's a V2. We actually just recently resolved to restructure our planning department to essentially bring out housing services and the exact same concept, the mobile crisis intervention team that will start 40 hours a week during our highest need time to provide something in addition, additive to sometimes they'll handle things by themselves, sometimes they'll co-respond with police or fire, and we're going to be feeling our way through this as much as everyone else. And so, an opportunity of regional cooperation is really just sharing what we're going through. Because looking around the country, I think we're all realizing at the same time that this is a service that we knows quite how to do it yet. There's the COOGS model that's out there. It's not exactly what we're doing, but it's not, and I think Denver has something similar that's been really successful. So, but we are all doing it at the same time. And we can also use that to lobby because we could all use some money to get this done and sustain funding. We have not identified any city-owned properties that would accommodate the navigation center yet. We did commit in our housing element, which was certified this week, to pursue 2 more Project Home Key sites. And that may offer up an opportunity because that's other people's money too, which is nice. We also, our police, we've had a MET team, mental health evaluation team. We've had that for quite some time. We're early with that. It's been pretty successful. Along with the firefighter, paramedics, and city staff, they perform weekly outreach checks that are encampments and people in vehicles. They have pretty good knowledge of who's in the city, and I imagine it's the same in all of our cities. We also we contract with St. Joseph Center to provide, I think, 6-day-a-week outreach services. Pretty much daily, they're out there, they're talking to people, trying to connect them with services, giving short-term therapy. Ultimately, all this stuff hits the same brick wall that we all have, which is permanent support housing. Other services in Culver City include Exodus Recovery, which is 24-hour psychiatric crisis center, open all the time, and walk-ins can go in there. But once again, same problem. It's great to have the services, but there's nowhere ultimately to send people. And then J.D. Hirsch is actually located either in Culver City or right on the border in LA, in a weird flank of the city. And we have Exceptional Children's Foundation, one location that's pretty specific, and also Allies for Every Child, and which provides some mental health services. And I will turn it over to Jeremy's wife, who is our assistant to the city manager on homelessness, if she wants to add anything, because she's really the expert on this stuff for Culver City. If she's still there.
Hey, everybody. My name is Aramis White Sharon. I'm the assistant to the city manager on homelessness. Councilmember Fish actually gave a very extensive list of all of the services that are currently being offered in Culver City. He did mention our mobile crisis unit. We are in the process of the development of that unit, and hopefully it'll be up and running and will be a great help to the community. The one other thing that wasn't mentioned was we do utilize the Los Angeles County Mental Health Department, their PET team. So when we do have cases where we need to do some type of hold or things like that, we do lean on the county for additional services in that area. Other than that, I feel like Councilmember Fish did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to do a quick time check. I know we do this about a quarter after we started late. So with everybody's indulgence, we'll perhaps go a little late. But if we have to leave, I certainly understand. I also wanted to recognize that as part of this meeting, we have Oakland County and LA City on the call. Either of you could probably fill days worth of conversation around this. But if there's something that you feel is important or relevant that you'd like to add at this time, it would be a good time to do.
Hi, and apologies. I'm still having a lot of trouble hearing you, Dr. Gold. So apologies, but I did want to mention that I reached out to the Department of Mental Health, particularly after the presentation of OCB Well, because there's also a pilot that is that the Department of Mental Health in LA County is working on called Hollywood 2.0. While it is not currently within the WSCCOG area, it is a pilot that I think there's hope to replicate moving forward, which leverages state mental health funds that were awarded to the county for this program. And then obviously hoping to leverage that and work through kind of CalAIM and some of the changes to be able to have a lot of the programs that I think were talked about, including the residential component for mental health treatment and being able to have a large part of the spectrum of care in terms of behavioral health, mental health services. So if other members of the council, and if council members here representing your cities, if you're interested in a presentation from the Department of Mental Health, I think it would be really helpful to hear as well that innovation that is happening within the county and how it could potentially move forward and, and have a place within the West Side COG area. So I'm happy. I made a connection to Winnie, and I'm happy to follow up to make sure that there's a time when DMH can present to the group.
Great, thank you, sir. Okay, I'll just briefly, in the interest of time, speak a little bit about Beverly Hills. We've been working on a lot of homeless, but obviously our population has increased also. And we've provided services to that population for a long time, as I'm sure everybody's city has, the notion that we actually know our homeless. There was a time where our police were actually taking dental appointments just to cost. But obviously the equation's gotten more complicated, and the issue of how do we house them. We have a nice relationship with Pat. We do that a lot. In fact, Councilmember Nazari was that. I'm going to have her speak for a moment at the opening of their latest center just the other day. And we're doing much of the things that everybody else has talked about with mental evaluation teams connected to the police, the fire department, and things like that. So I think there's a commonality here that we can certainly tap into. Briefly.
So it was a beautiful facility. It had about 280 some odd rooms. What was interesting was that it was an all-encompassing program. And I think what we're seeing now is that with mental health care, we also need to look at substance abuse and prevention and ways that we can have programs that also help those that are unhoused to be able to get the care that they need. So that was really one of the most beneficial parts that I saw, that they were trying to bring all of it in the facility that they were offering. There was mental health care, substance abuse, as well as the housing all encompassing, because a lot of times if somebody is unhoused, they're not able to have the transportation or what have you to go. The other issue that I've been noticing is that we also need to start thinking ahead of time to have the staffing for a lot of these facilities, because you can figure out the locations, but if you don't have the bodies to be able to sit down and have the training that they need to help, that's going to be an issue as well. So I hope that that's something that we're trying to plan for. But I think for our city, what we really are starting to notice, if you look at the amount of resources, the time, and the funding that we're all spending in our various cities, it's a lot of resources. And if we have a more holistic approach that's more comprehensive, I think we will all be more successful. So a lot of now, with a lot of the addiction, people are starting to have mental health care issues because of the opioid crisis and what have you. So
great, thank you. So I'm just going to wrap it up kind of where I started. And if it's okay with everybody, and ask me and Cecilia to put together a working towards to kind of list all of these resources who want maybe quantitated some and bring it back to us in a way that we really talk about collaboration and making the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
One addition, Dr. Holder, you had mentioned also, we received that presentation last meeting, and I would love to sort of empower that working group to explore that set of collaboration and that project.
I think it's a great idea. Any and all for everybody. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to move us to Jeff, who's been very patient. We said we gave you 3 minutes. We'll give you 3 minutes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Before I get to sort of my report, which is included in the board packet, I did just want to make mention, just because of the last 2 agenda items. I recently presented an award to the city of Redondo Beach for their homeless court program. It's a court that is outdoors. They bring it to the city. So those people who are unhoused, who have received citations or have otherwise found themselves foul of the law, don't have to travel to a court that's usually far outside their jurisdiction. It's been very successful. I can get you some more information if you have an interest in that, but essentially they also are pairing it with their tiny home and their pallet home shelter and their temporary housing, so that if some member of the community who is homeless accepts housing, their crimes are waived and they get placed into housing instead of having to pay fines or go into any other system. So I just wanted to make mention of that. Certainly willing to connect you with Redondo Beach or others. I know Torrance is also doing the same thing as the city of Long Beach. Just to focus now on my legislative update, hopefully there's a lot of information in there. I did want to call out some of the mental health, behavioral health package that was signed by the governor. Not all of the bills, but certainly several of them were signed, as well as Care Court. Cal Cities was influential in sort of getting amendments to that Care Court bill that really helped define exactly what cities must do in conjunction with that system. So those are all good things that are going on. I'll be brief and skip the rest of it unless there are questions, but I did want to call out, I sent a couple emails to city managers and council members today, just reminding folks to take the membership survey, which is included. The link to that is included in the report in the board packet, but that survey will help us figure out what to focus on next year. So that's something that I want to make sure as many people fill out as possible. And then, of course, I did send an email with 2 invites, one for a CalPERS forum. It's happening in Anaheim at the beginning of next month, and then a seismic activity event with Dr. Lucy Jones, which is coming up this month on the 20th, I believe. And then finally, I just want to make mention, obviously, Some of the previous, before the meeting began, we were talking a little bit about membership and some of the actions that took place at the annual conference. I'm certainly happy to connect with anyone who's interested in following up with that in more detail. That is related to the Our Neighborhood Voices ballot measure that the membership did decide just to send back to committee to discuss. They didn't want to take the action to support that ballot measure. And actually they even refused to debate the subject by large margin. So I'm happy to discuss that more, but I'll leave it there unless there are questions.
Thank you for that. It might be worthwhile, I don't know if the COG is interested, but it might be worthwhile to actually to take on that issue of constitutional amendment. If there's interest in that, maybe we're all people. If there's interest in seeing how people feel about that, let's talk about what we can do, what we can't do, what we should do. Not now. Okay, we have a couple of things to, a couple or three things to receive and file. Any conversation on any of them? Okay, seeing none. Cecilia or Winnie, do you have any announcements?
I'm just going to go back to C on the mobile source air pollution, the zero emission infrastructure funding. If any of your cities are looking to try to build infrastructure related to heavy, like basically trucks, electric trucks, this is $50 million. They are very interested in receiving proposals. If you have large industrial users or commercial users that might be interested in creating truck EV charging infrastructure, this is a great source of funding. And that's all I have. Winnie, do you want to talk about future meetings?
What was that, Cecilia?
That's okay. I was going to say future meetings, but I think we have other announcements, maybe of other cities.
Yeah. Let's continue with any other announcements from the city.
Anybody want to announce anything? Happy birthday.
We do have an announcement in the chat from Josh Kirby.
Okay.
And Josh had mentioned he was unable to stick around, but wanted to note that Assemblymember Bloom will be hosting the student loan forgiveness webinar on Tuesday, October 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. to learn about how to apply for the public service loan forgiveness program by October 31st and other changes to the federal student loan program.
Fantastic. Very good. Mine relieved. Okay. Any other announcements?
One quick one, more of a pat on the back. We just broke ground on our first two Project Home Key projects here in Culver City. It'll be 73. Every time I announce it, it gets one room smaller, but we're at 73 rooms split between transitional housing, folks coming out off the street, and permanent supportive housing. And it's pretty exciting for the city. We're very proud and hope to continue the success.
Congratulations. Very nice. Well, okay. Our next meeting is
Dr. Gold, you have an announcement from Fernando Morales from the county.
okay, please.
Hi, apologies again. I believe this may be the last board meeting that Supervisor Kuehl will be in office, and I'll be representing her here. So I just wanted to say, it's great to see everybody's faces here, and just wanted to say thank you on her behalf. I know, there's a lot up in the air right now, but, our office will continue to be available during this time, and as there's a little more clarity as to who the next representative will be in the seat. And as always, feel free to reach out. Happy to make any connections. I'm not sure who will remain or would hope to remain within the next office, but once we have some clarity as well, I'm happy to send a summary of some of the folks that will continue or that will remain in, whether it's health or housing and homelessness and infrastructure and transportation, and the many topics that are discussed by the COG. So as always, I've really enjoyed working with you. I will not be one of those likely that will remain out of my own choosing, regardless, but it's really been a pleasure to work with you and everybody that maybe is not on camera, but is incredible within your cities. So just wanted to say thank you on her behalf.
Thank you very much for everything you've done. I did hear today that the supervisor is reconsidering staying around. Go, sorry. Just a joke. All right, thank you. Any other announcements? No. Okay. Our next meeting will be Thursday, December 8th, 2022 at noon in a location called TBD. I don't know where that is. TBD. All right. Is there any member of the public who would like to address us? That would be the time. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will close the public comments and I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the discussion. Sorry about the microphone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fernando, we'll miss you. It's been great working with you.
Thank you.
Lots of go.
We got it done.
Yes.
Thank you.